Okay, I'm going to call to order this meeting of the 18th of November, 2021, City of Nashua Planning Board. Can we get a roll call, please?
Mayor Dantas, Mike Peterson,
Here.
Scott Leclaire,
Here.
Adam Varley,
Here.
Maggie Harper here, Alderman David Tenza, Alderman Jan Schmidt, Dan Hudson,
Here.
Bob Bollinger,
Here.
Larry Hirsch,
Here.
and Mark Meehan.
Okay, so we do have a quorum, so we're going to move on. First up on the agenda is approval of minutes. In your packet, you had minutes from the November 4th, 2021 meeting. Has anybody on the board had a chance to review those and want to make a motion as to whether they can be accepted as written?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
All right, so we have a motion by Mr. Varley to accept the November 4th, 2021 minutes as written. Do we have a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Second by Mr. Bollinger. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
5-2.
5,
5,
2,
0.
yeah, with 2 abstentions. So that motion passes. Communications?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Board. The following correspondences were received after your packet was sent to you. Case number A21-0237 and 0238, that's 67 Groton Road. Letter from Joe Mandola, street construction engineer, dated November 16, 2021. Lot consolidation subdivision, updated plan sheet for 67 Groton, and waiver for overhead utilities for 67 Groton. 8 Merritt Parkway, preliminary review under 190-139 elevation drawings provided for that project. And number 5, correspondence, City of Nashua, zoning ordinance amendment. Number 6, correspondence, BJ's Wholesale Club versus City of Nashua, appealing planning board decision pursuant to RSA 677:15. That would be it.
Okay, thanks a lot. Any reports from committees or liaison? I don't know if we have any yet. Don't hear any. Okay. All right, so first up I'll read the procedures here. So after each legal notice of conditional special use permit, site plan, or subdivision is read by myself, the board will first determine if the application is complete and ready for us to take jurisdiction. If we take jurisdiction, the public hearing will begin, at which time the applicant or their representative will be given time to present an overview and description of their project. They'll speak to whether or not they agree with the recommended staff stipulations, and the board will then have an opportunity to ask relevant follow-up questions of the applicant or staff. I'll then ask for testimony from the audience, including people here and online. First, I'll ask for anybody wishing to speak in opposition or concern to a plan to speak. If you so choose, if you're in person here, please come forward to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Online, you'll be asked to unmute and speak the same. At that point, it'll be your time to express concerns or ask questions you may have regarding the plan. Next, I'll ask for testimony coming from anyone wishing to speak in favor of the plan. Then the board will ask any relevant follow-up questions of the applicant. The applicant will be given a rebuttal period, at which time they can speak to any of the concerns raised by the public testimony. After this is completed, the public hearing will end and the board will resume a public meeting, at which time we'll deliberate and vote on the application before us. We ask that everyone keep their remarks to the subject at hand and not repeat what has already been said. We want to be fair to everyone and make the best possible decision based on testimony presented and considering all of our applicable approval criteria established in our Nashua revised ordinances for conditional special use permits, site plans, and subdivision plans. And thank everybody for their interest and courteous attention. If you're here, I'd ask that you turn off any phones. We'll put them on vibrate. If you're online, I'd ask that you'd stay on mute until you want to speak in any of the public testimony parts of the hearing here, so. Okay, so moving on to our agenda. So old business conditional special use permits, there are none. Old business subdivision plans, case number 821-0177. That's Jigna and Sachin Patel. That case has been tabled until our December 2nd meeting at this point, so we won't be hearing that tonight. Old business site plans, there are none. New business conditional special use permits, there are none. New business subdivision plan, this is case number 821-0238, Dana George's LLC owner. This is an application and acceptance of proposed amendment to previously approved condominium site plan and condominium documents. This property is located at 67 Groton Road and Osprey Lane. And we're going to hear this in conjunction with new business site plan, 821-0237. This would be same owner and same location. So first up, I'll ask the board, with regard to the subdivision plan, 821-0238, has anybody had a chance to take a look at the application and want to make a motion as to whether it's ready for us to take jurisdiction? Mr. Peterson?
I'll make a motion that project 821-0238 subdivision plan is ready for us to act upon.
Okay, so we have that motion to take jurisdiction at 821-0238 by Mr. Peterson. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Varley. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. That motion passes. Next up, regarding the site plan for 821-0237. Anybody want to make a motion on jurisdiction? Mr. Peterson?
I'll make a motion that we accept jurisdiction to project 821-0237 site plan.
All right, so we have that motion to take 821-0237 into jurisdiction by Mr. Peterson. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hirsch. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? That motion passes. Okay, so we have both of those. You can go ahead and, present them both together, and then we'll ask questions after you get through both the subdivision and the site plan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is Paul Chisholm. I'm a professional engineer with Keach and Orcham Associates, with engineers and surveyors of record for the project. The project before you tonight is twofold. Number one, to consolidate lot 625 into lot 134 to create a single parcel. And the second is to amend the previously approved Groton Estates condominium site plan. Linda has up on the board the site plan from the site plan set. And basically, the goal of this project is to provide a second useful life for the barn while realizing the density for the overall property. The barn is no longer used for agricultural purposes, and nor has it for a long time. Rather than tear it down or do something else with it, the applicant is seeking to basically reconstruct the inside of the structure, maintain the outer facade to the maximum extent practicable. Obviously, there would have to be some small updates for code compliance, maybe adding in some windows and things like that. But the applicant has had the barn in the family for a very, very long time. It's obviously a unique and almost iconic structure in the area, and they're very excited at the prospect of basically giving it a second useful life. Prior to getting here, we did submit and receive approvals for 3 variances with the zoning board back in July. Those were to allow more than one unit on a single parcel. The second was for multifamily use, because the 3 units in the barn are technically considered multifamily by code. And then the last is for minimum lot area, with the addition of the water utilities in the area. Obviously, a lot like this can support a little bit more density than with septic and wells. So all those were approved back in July. And then following that, we revised the plans to depict the lot consolidation, proposed the 3 barn units. And Linda, if you could put on the floor plans and renderings of the barn, just to give everybody a look at those. You can see, if you've driven out there, you know that this is more or less what that structure looks like. This is the red barn off of the White House. And 3 units will essentially be kind of cut in the long way, if you will. And each of the units is about 3,500 square feet, more or less, so they're pretty substantially sized units. And you can see the floor plans there. All of them are proposed as 3 bedrooms. We have received state approval for subdivision as well as the subsurface approvals, which is really just the fancy way of saying the septics are all approved. All 4 units on Osprey Lane and the White House will have separate septic systems altogether. The 3 units in the barn will each have individual tanks, but they'll share a leach field. And what that will do is kind of separate them a little bit. If someone puts something down the drain that shouldn't be, it should get caught in the tank rather than screw up the leach field for everybody. So other than that, if you want to go back to the site plan, Linda. We've also added all of that utility information into the plan set. We went through all of the plan notes, updated those, verified parking calculations and things of that nature. And then lastly, the other change that you might recognize is on Osprey Lane, the units were previously shown as really just a 60 by 40 box, a pretty substantial footprint for a detached home. Their actual architectural footprints that are going to be constructed are shown on here now. The units are a little bit smaller than that in terms of footprint. So because of that, there's actually a slight reduction in impervious area and a slight benefit to open space as a result of these changes. The other piece of that is behind the barn, currently there's like a driveway into the back where there's a garage door. That driveway is going to be removed and make way for basically a backyard area for those folks for the 3 units. In addition to the site plan, we're also proposing 2 waivers. One is for maximum parking, and the second is for overhead utilities. We have submitted letters for those. I'd be happy to read them into the record or discuss them briefly with you guys, whatever you'd prefer. But beyond that, we also did receive comments from DPW a little bit earlier in the week. We view those as pretty easily addressed. Obviously, it will probably require a little bit of tinkering to the final site plan, but nothing we don't feel comfortable working with engineering on to finish this project up. We've also reviewed the staff reports, take no exception to any of the proposed conditions. So at that point, I guess I'd like to just ask you if you'd like me to read the waivers or discuss them further.
So the waivers, the one for underground utilities, is that specific to the barn?
That is specific to the house and the barn units.
Right, because the other one, the other Osprey Lanes were, that's underground.
That's
right?
and the underground
Yeah.
utilities are actually already built. Yeah.
Right, yeah, so this is just specific to the barn, which is already overhead?
Yes.
Okay. And then what was the other waiver?
It was for maximum parking, and I guess with like a multifamily use like this, technically, with 3 units in the barn, the maximum allowed parking is 1.9 spaces per unit.
Yeah.
The garage has 2 spaces in it for each unit, so, that's just slightly above, but there's also an additional parking area just off to the side of it. So it's nothing egregious, obviously, it will fit the property, it's already there. It's not like this is a new pavement going in, so.
Yeah, okay.
I apologize if I missed this, but just to confirm, the access to these units is gonna remain the existing driveway, that's not changing?
That's correct, yep. And I will say, one of the comments brought up by Joe in his review was asking about the gate. The gate is gonna go away, so it will be a little bit more open, but really one of the goals that they're looking to do is kind of keep the property looking the same, so it's the same kind of feel and character that exists today. Obviously, it's a very nice, stone wall out to the front, so they're looking to keep that as much as possible.
Okay. Other questions by the board? The applicant? Mr. Peterson?
Just a minor observation. When I look at the subdivision plan staff report and the site plan staff report, the numbers for the total site area, it's off by like 1 digit. Could be a typo. So I would expect those 2 to agree, but somebody will have to fix that along the way.
Sure.
That's just in the staff report? Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
both staff
yeah,
reports have it.
okay. Oh, yeah, yep, all right. Other questions for the applicant or staff? Okay. Mr. Hudson?
Yeah, I just have something that, I don't know if it's in the engineering comments, but something I would want added to the plan is just that that solid waste pickup will be done privately. We had one recent case where they got to construction. We hadn't talked about who was picking up the trash, and the DPW does not pick up trash in private roads.
Right.
So I just want that clearly noted on the revised plans.
Okay. I think, do we have a stipulation to, like, minor plan corrections or something like that, that we can? Yeah, there's minor drafting corrections. Do you,
That's fine, I
can
mean.
you cover that
it
in
can-
that?
Sure, just a quick comment on that.
Yep.
The 4 units on Osprey Lane were approved previously with private, so I have no problem adding a note for that. You know, for the house in the 3 barn units, really, they front on Groton Road, so I think it was our intent to have that remain as tote pickup out front. I think it was, what I had heard is if it's 4 units or less, that's allowed just for that part. But obviously private trash pickup for Osprey. But certainly that's something we can work through and figure that out before Joe and you sign off.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. Other questions for the applicant by the board? Ms. Zarper?
These are all, these units will all be for sale, or are these rental units?
That hasn't been decided yet. I actually asked him that a little bit earlier today. It's just gonna depend on what the market's doing when they're ready to go. So he's focusing on getting the 4 units on Osprey built now and getting ready for sale, and then he's gonna turn his attention to the barn. If the market keeps going and gets crazy, I could imagine he could sell them. But it is the potential that he could hold on to them and rent them, and then it's also the potential he could hold them for a while, rent them, and then eventually sell them off individually as well.
Okay.
So it could be anything, there's no decision yet on that.
I guess I'm just trying to picture the condo association and kind of how that whole thing's gonna work.
So yeah, so the condo association's actually kind of interesting. Morgan Hollis's office is working on updating the draft of that, but it's kind of rolled into one. So they have to break it down very specifically because it contemplates not just 3 units in the barn and the White House, but also the 4 units on Osprey Lane. And it, you know, they have to get pretty detailed on who's responsible for what and future maintenance and things like that. So really, each unit, if you will, is kind of its own condo, and would be really ready to be sold or held in ownership and rented,
Okay.
in that sense.
Right.
Okay.
And is that, just for staff, that's something reviewed by staff and by the city?
Yes,
documents.
something that's reviewed by staff and corporation council as well. It's part of the condominium document review process.
Got it, okay.
So would that, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ms.
So
Zarper.
would that have to
Yeah.
be determined
Yeah.
prior, whether they will be rental or market units?
No, ultimately, the units will be created as independent units, but ultimately the owner could choose to retain ownership of those and rent them out. I believe that's what the applicant is saying. The owner could also choose to convey them separately as individual condominium units.
Okay.
But
So-
the board this evening would functionally be approving the creation of those units as part of an approval.
And just to be clear, the 4 units on Osprey, those will be sold. That's the intent there.
Right.
The applicant lives in the White House and for the time being plans to do so. Really, the units in question are just the barn units.
So they could potentially be the majority owner as far as the condo association?
Well, they'd
goes
only be
then?
3/8 because there's 8 units total. So the 3 barn units are only 3 of the 8,
Okay,
if that makes sense. Because the White House is 1, so that's 4, and then you have the 4 on Osprey.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, other questions by the board? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and open up to the audience, or anybody sitting here, or anybody online. If you have a question or concern for the applicant, go ahead and step forward here, or unmute and state your name and address for record, and go ahead and ask your question. See anybody up there? Okay. All right, hearing none, I will give the board one last opportunity while we're in the hearing to ask any questions of the applicant or staff. Okay, hearing none, I'm gonna go ahead and close the hearing on both of these items. Okay, so we've got the 2 items in front of us. Obviously, the subdivision on Osprey, we've already seen and approved, just some detailing on the size of the facilities to kind of catch up on things, and then we've just got the 3 The change being the barn itself with the 3 additional units. Seems like they've done a pretty good job to keep the character of that facility, which is kind of nice. And the overhead, to me, seems okay if it's already there versus redigging it. We do have underground on the existing parcel, so the waivers seem reasonable to me. Anybody have any other comments or want to talk about anything in particular on either one?
Oh, just a minor thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Peterson.
I'm not sure who wrote this. So Joe Mandola wrote in his letter of November 16th, comment number 4 regarding vehicle backups at the entrance, that if there's one car there, the other one has to be out in the road. Did that get resolved?
Oh, hang on, I'd have to open the,
Comment number 4.
yeah, well, maybe staff can respond to that first. We don't have the hearing open right now, so,
I believe that was the Gady reference would be removed, but
okay.
Yep.
Does that staff seem reasonable to you?
That's correct.
Okay, yep, that makes sense, Mike?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Other comments while we're in the meeting? Mr. Hudson?
maybe it's a question for staff. I'm just curious how these properties will be addressed now that there's gonna be a combined lot. There were addresses off Osprey Lane, and then there was the Groton Road. Now this parcel, the larger parcel, will be a Groton Road address. I'm just curious if the units on Osprey Lane will be numbered off Osprey Lane.
The Osprey Lane units will be Osprey Lane, the 4 units there, and the fire department has already provided the addresses for the other.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Other comments for the board? Ms. Harper?
This is a question for staff. I'm not seeing, so did the fire department make any comments about that, the access for the new barn?
Yeah, the fire
Fundament-
department's all set with.
They're all set, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything further? All right, does anybody want to make a motion? We should start with the subdivision. Mr. Varley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would make a motion to approve new business project A21-0237 site plan. And that, let's see,
Maybe we should probably do subdivision first,
oh,
just because,
Sorry.
yeah,
You know
the
what, that's-
order of it, yeah. Yep.
I literally was going to do a motion as to this
Okay.
subdivision plan, but
That's fine.
took them incorrectly.
Yep.
Sorry. So I will revise that to say, I will first make a motion to approve new business project A21-0238 subdivision plan. And that will be with the finding that the plan does meet the requirements outlined in subdivision NRO section 190-138G. And that will be with a total of 9 stipulations. And all of those stipulations will be as written in the staff report, with the exception that stipulation number 2 will be updated to include a date of November 16th, 2021.
Okay, so we have that motion to approve A21-0238 by Mr. Varley. Do we have a second on that? Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? Ms. Hudson?
Can we just change 2, it says an email from Joe Mandola, it's actually a letter, and that, the same will be true for the next item. Can we just make that amendment?
Fair.
So I will amend my motion, and so that's as to indicate that as the stipulations number 2 and 3, they'll be corrected to indicate that the correspondence from Joe Mandola and Mark Rapaglia are letters and not emails.
Okay.
I don't know if Mark
Actually,
says,
still
I was
in.
talking.
Oh, I thought you
I meant the
said-
subdivision and site plan.
Gotcha,
I-
sorry, I thought you
about
meant this
that.
is.
Referencing engineering comments.
All right, so revision to that amendment, so stipulation number 2 to be changed to read that it will be a letter from Joe Mandola.
Okay. All right, Mr. Peterson, you still good with that as a second? That change?
Excuse me?
You
Do I
still
second
good-
it?
You still good with that change as a second?
Yes, I'm totally good with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, that motion passes. Regarding the site plan? Mr. Varley?
I'll try this again. So I would make a motion to approve new business project A 21-0237 site plan, finding that it does meet the requirements outlined in subdivision NRO section 190-138G. And that will be with a total of 10 stipulations. Stipulation number 1 is written in the staff report. Stipulation number 2 being a waiver request for a waiver from section 190-198, which requires maximum parking spaces, and that will read, is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation number 3, also being a waiver request from section 190-221, requiring underground utilities, and that will read, is granted, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation number 4 will be updated to indicate that the comments from Joseph Mendola are in a letter, and that letter is dated November 16th, 2021. And then stipulations 5 through 10 to be as written in the staff report.
Okay, so we have that motion by Mr. Varley to approve A 21-0237 site plan with the 10 stipulations as stated. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hirsch. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? That motion passes. Okay, thanks. Next up on the agenda, we have new business site plan. This is case 821-0249. This is Vickery Realty Trust owner, Joann Stores applicant. And this is a proposed change to the building facade. This property is located at 4 Coliseum Ave. So anybody on the board had a chance to take a look at this application and want to make a motion as to whether this is ready for us to take jurisdiction? Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to accept jurisdiction over new business site plan, case A21-0249.
All right, so we have a motion to take jurisdiction of A21-0249 by Mr. Bollinger. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hirsch. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None, that motion passes, so we have jurisdiction. Do we have somebody online or something that wants to present this? or-
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, yep.
Great. My name is Matt Parks. I'm with GPD Group, the architecture and engineering firm hired by Joann to complete the construction documents for new Joann Fabrics located there at 4 Coliseum Way. And I also have virtually attending Rachel Russell with GPD Group, and also representatives from Joann Fabrics, Ken Douglas, he's the Director of Construction, and Josh Sieber, he's a project manager. So what we're here for today is we're proposing for a waiver to use EFS on the exterior of the facade and the use of the green facade color. Should I be presenting?
Yeah, you can share the screen if you want, if you've got the, like, elevation or something. I mean, we have a copy, but people listening in don't. Yeah, so,
Okay.
unless you have one, Linda, that you want to share. You have one?
Yeah, if they don't, I do.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. We can see your screen. Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Great. So Joann is relocating to an existing vacant space. It's actually the former Babies R Us. I believe it's been vacant for a few years. They're moving into a space that's 3 times larger than their current space. And they've chosen Nashua as the first city in the entire Boston metropolitan area to upgrade to the new prototype design language. This is somewhat new branding elements, and the closest store to receive similar branding elements is in Paramus, New Jersey, just outside of New York City. So we're really excited to incorporate the new design, both in and out, inside and outside of the building. So really the waiver that we're looking for is the use of EFS, which this existing facade right now is EFS. So we didn't see an issue there. And the green element here is the Joann green branding element. It's on their letterhead. It's incorporated throughout the interior of the store. It is their brand. So it's very important for that color to be utilized on the facade. This would just be EFS, and the finish would match the existing finish as well, the existing EFS finish. And also we've gone back and forth with the zoning board to get to this point, and we've modified the facade a couple different times to align with what the board was looking for. We've kept the canopy that was originally proposed to be removed. We've incorporated a cornice above the green element. And we've also incorporated 3 heights in the overall facade to be in conformance with the requirements.
Great. Anything else you wanted to add, or is that your presentation?
I would say the use of the green, we've researched other tenants in the immediate area and in other shopping centers within Nashua. Again, with the use of bright colors, if needed, I can show examples of those. But we feel like we're in alignment. We're really providing a new, refreshed facade to an existing vacant building, and we hope that it's acceptable.
Okay. I guess I'll open up to the board. Any questions for the applicant? Ms. Harper?
Just a quick question, just because I saw a note in the packet about either painting or screening the back of the facade facing Coliseum Avenue, but it's still showing it in the drawing. So is that going to be changed prior to?
Yes, we can paint that white. That is not a problem. The back side of the bump up. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions by the board? Okay. Not hearing any, at this time, I will open up to the public. There is nobody here in the building for the public, but if there's anybody online that wishes to speak in opposition or concern, go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for record, and ask your question or comment. Yeah, I'm not hearing any. I guess at this point, I'll open one more time up to the board. Any other questions for the applicant or staff? So staff reviewed this. Really, the only thing that's, I'll call it out of conformance with our current guidelines is the color and the material.
Yes, they worked with us to get things, to maintain at least the architectural features.
Everything else is in compliance. Okay, thanks.
Screening.
Yep. All right. Hearing no more questions of the board or anybody from the public, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing on this. So taking this into the meeting, personally, I'm kind of glad to see somebody going in there. It's been empty for a while. That's a good thing.
Right.
I think we have, certainly approved. I mean, with comes to mind to me is like Home Depot, which is right next door, that has bright orange, so, to me, this isn't anything outside of,
And the materials, and we've
Yeah, the
raised
materials
exceptions for
are-
people to use the ethos many times.
yeah, and that whole development is pretty much that way, so I don't have any issues with it, but I'm welcome to hear comments from anybody on the board. Anybody have questions, comments they want to talk about in the meeting? No? All right. Anybody want to just make a motion then? Anyone? Mr. Barley?
Sure. Can I just borrow you?
Yep.
This is easier to do it than moving
Yep.
down. All right, I'll make a motion to approve new business, project A21-0249, site plan amendment to NR 1266 to renovate the facade. And that will be with a determination that the site plan does meet the requirements outlined in site plan NRO section 190-146D. And there are 3 stipulations. The first is a waiver request from section 190-172D2F, which specifies exterior building materials requirements. Not read is granted will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. The second is also a waiver request from section 190-172D3 with respect to facade colors. And that will read is granted and will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. And stipulation number 3 shall read as written in the staff report.
Okay, so we have that motion by Mr. Barley to approve A21-0249 with the stipulations as indicated, including the waivers, or stated. Do we have a second on that? Second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion by the board? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? That motion passes. Okay,
Thank you.
thanks a lot. Next up on our agenda, we have case number A21-0255. This is Weston Associates Development Company, Inc. Proposed one-year extension to construct 2 retail buildings. This property is at 546 Amherst Street. So, first up by the board, has anybody had a chance to take a look at this application? This is again A21-0255, the one-year extension in the site plan. I want to make a motion as ready to take jurisdiction. Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to accept jurisdiction over case A21-0255.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Bollinger to take jurisdiction of A21-0255. Do we have a second on that? Second by Ms. Harper. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. That motion passes, so we have jurisdiction. Do we have somebody from the applicant that wants to present this plan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can. Yep.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Rice with TF Moran. I'm here on behalf of the owner, Weston Associates Incorporated. And this is for the property located at 546 Amherst Street. I'll bring up a color up here of the plan. Did my screen come up okay?
Yep, that's good.
So this is for the property that's currently has the former SNHU building on it. Diagonal to us across the street here is Blackstone Drive and the recently completed gas station. And this is Round Pond here. So we're requesting a one-year extension. We'd received conditional approval back in December of 2019. And we came back before the planning board last December and received a one-year extension on December 3rd. At that time, we were still finalizing the off-site plans for the turning lane here off of Amherst Street and some other site plan comments at the time. Since that time, since last December, we have finalized both the off-site plans and the site plans. We've addressed all engineering and planning comments. The only item that is remaining is there's an easement for the mast arm here, and city engineering is working with us to help obtain the signature for that from the private abutting landowner. So we're just requesting a one-year extension because that process has taken a little bit longer than expected, and with some of the delays for COVID and such, the owner wasn't in a position to be able to pull a building permit by this December. And we're hopeful that we'd be able to start work sometime in the spring of next year. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thanks. Anybody on the board have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no issues with the extension. I did have a question, though, about potential off-site improvements. You've noted the fact that the gas station convenience store across Amherst Street is open now.
Yes.
Does your off-site improvement plan, will that consider any possible signal timing modifications required, not just from your site, but also due to the influence of traffic from the gas C-store across the street?
I think at the time that this was done, we knew that both of those were coming. I would have to double check, but I think that was already taken into account with the signal timing. But that is something that we can look at when, prior to having the plan signed.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. I'm sure it's something that could be accommodated with staff. I just didn't know, since now you actually have true operational, data potentially to work with the gas C-store, if that would potentially influence the future signal operations when your site comes online. So.
No, that's a good point. And I believe, because I did the gas station project here at 4 Blackstone as well, and I think when we did the traffic study for that, we looked at it both ways, with and without the signal, to see how that would function. So I think we have all the data if we have to make any adjustments, but I do think that it assumed that was operational, as well as the one that was proposed a little further to the right here at the time. So I do think that that's taken into account, but we can definitely double check that. And if I could just add that also, since that time, we did go before the Board of Public Works in March and received approval from them on March 25th, I believe it was.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rice. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions by the board on the extension? No? Okay. At this time, I'll open it up to the audience. Anybody here or anybody online wishing to speak in opposition, concern, or have a question of the plan? If you are online, go ahead and unmute. State your name and address for record. Don't see anybody? Okay. All right, one last chance for the board while we're in the hearing. Any questions of the applicant or staff? Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing on this. So we have 1 year extension. We've had several of these, obviously, over the last 2 years. Generally speaking, we would do at least 1, maybe 2 extensions. Once we get to about 3, we usually start wondering and what's going on. But I think it seems reasonable with the environment that we've had over the last couple of years, so I don't have any issue with it. But anybody in the board have comment, questions, or anything you want to talk about in the meeting? All right, does anybody want to make a motion? Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion to grant the 1 year extension regarding new business case 821-0255.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the 1 year extension for case number 821-0255 by Mr. Bollinger. Do we have a second on that? Second by Mr. Hirsch. Any further discussion by the board? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? That motion passes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Okay, so we have a couple more items on our agenda. First up is just a review of our tentative agenda to determine proposals of regional impact. Anybody had a chance to take a look at that tentative agenda and want to make a motion as to whether there are any items of regional significance here?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that there are no projects of regional impact based on the technical review meeting of November 1st, 2021.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Bollinger. There are no proposals of regional impact at this time on the tentative agenda. Do we have a second on that? Second by Mr. Varley. Any further discussion by the board? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Okay, last up on our agenda, we're in now the discussion part of the meeting. And first up on the discussion end is a preliminary conceptual consult. This is for 8 Merritt Parkway. In your packet, you had a new, I'd say a revised proposal from the last discussion we'd had. And I'll just remind everybody, the intent of this process at this point with the board is a presentation by the applicant, or potential applicant. This is not an application at this time, it's a discussion presentation. And a time for us to ask questions and talk with the folks here that want to present. And you know, theoretically, down the road, it would become an actual application, or potentially could become an actual application, at which point there would be public hearing and public comment and everything. So there is no public comment period as part of this discussion. This is for the board only at this point. So that being said, I don't know, Mr. Sullivan, is there any other things I should add to that, or?
No, Mr. Chair, I think you hit everything with those comments. This is a conceptual conversation only of the proposal within the context of the city's master plan. It should not involve specific discussions about drainage details, traffic details, or any specific zoning details. Certainly those would be discussed with a formal submission, but you should keep this at a concept level with the applicant. Thank you.
Okay. All right. That being said, do we have somebody at the potential future? Mr. Ballinger, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, yes, I would like to recuse myself from this discussion, if I may.
Sure,
Please.
okay.
Thank you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair.
Yep, okay. All right, so if we have somebody who wants to present, you have the floor. And just state your name and address for the record, if you don't mind.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rob Parsons, 11 Gilboa Lane in Nashua. Coming to you tonight, I just wanted to re-propose this project in a preliminary state, obviously. We came here to the board previously. Just wanted to give you some idea, background of how we got to this. Normally, you see me develop commercial assets in the city of Nashua, and it's unusual for me to develop residential in this city. However, I was brought to my attention that there's a severe need for housing in the city, and there's somewhat of a crisis. I attended a symposium about that and started me to look at other areas within the city that were underutilized, underdeveloped, and that would be, well received by residential. This area is one of my favorite areas in Nashua. I live in Exit 1. I've grown up in this particular area, and it's one of the best parts of Nashua, and I respect that. What I looked at when we first came to look at the development of this parcel, which is currently owned by Hannaford Supermarkets, we looked at it and said it's not necessarily a supermarket site, but if you look at it, to me, it's a good transitional area for residential. The zoning is flex use overlay district, which allows for some accommodation to to residential. When we first looked at it, it was well received, not by public, but by others that said this is very conducive to residential from our studies. We looked at it from a perspective of doing a very high-end luxury apartment community. We looked at the first model, modeled right after something in Westford, Massachusetts, a wealthier suburb of not that far from here. That was presented and went over very poorly, as we're all well, I don't have to state that, that we were, it became very clear that folks were not looking for that level of density, and were, regardless of the economic level of the project, it was not very well received. We retreated, looked back at the, we went back to the planning board, no pun intended, went back to the board and said, let's revisit this in another way that might be less intrusive. What we've come up with after reviewing the plan as well is, and seeing what we can fundamentally do is, consulting with the attorneys and whatnot. What we've come up with is 44 units of housing. They are not rental units, they are townhomes. So it will be home ownership, which was very resoundingly what I heard was They didn't want renters in this part of the city for some reason, regardless of how much the rent was. We don't want tenants there. I did hear a lot of, repercussions of the last go-around. It was low-income housing. It was never meant to be that. It was always market rate. It was a luxury apartment development, but that is completely gone. This is now a 44-unit, far less dense option, and as you can see in the conceptual plan, which he will go into much further, our engineer. This is home ownership. It's townhomes. It's very similar to another project that's been approved here within the city already. Dennis Myers is the architect of record for this. We have some elevations which are just for conversation purposes. Again, the Hall's Corner architectural overlay has a voice in how this is developed. It says it must be New England in design. With that being said, these are slightly higher than what, there's basically two things that we will need. And Jerry Prunier at the next hearing, when we do finally present this, will need some waivers. We believe there's only two. There's one for the height, which, because this is 2.5 stories and we're doing pitched roofs, it will need a waiver for height so that we don't do flat roofs. We're trying to comply with the New England nature of the neighborhood, which is part of the Hall's Corner overlay. And then secondly, it would be, this entire Hall's Corner was done, a flex use overlay was done in the 80s. A lot's changed since then. I was at Nashua High then. Clearly, some time has taken. And now it's, we don't really need the over 55 is what I'm hearing. So we'd seek a waiver to do market, to do it to whatever age group would want to buy there. Because we think that this is more entry level to the market, and then they can, which is much needed in the city, and then they would be looking to fall in love with this neighborhood and then move into the Cherrywood type of area and the surrounding neighborhoods. So that's what the two things that we're looking for. We picked 44 because this is, there was an allocation in the flex use overlay for over 55 that allowed for 60 units. 16 were built over 55 across the street, which left a residual remainder of 44 units of over 55, which is where we came up with that number. And then applying it to this size of a lot, it's really underpenetrated for the amount of acreage, but that allows us to give some buffer to the Cherrywood neighborhood, which we're very aware of. If you look at how we've laid out, with Paul, we've laid out this development, we've given great consideration to the neighborhood to the south and their line of sight. It's far removed from the pond. It's set back away from even the existing farmhouse that's in some state of renovation. But that allows for a buffer to all areas. And that's really what we're looking at. So we'd just like some feedback that we're in the right direction. I know that the neighborhood is very concerned about how this gets developed. I take that very personally. So I want to make sure that I don't offend anyone. I want them to come forth. I want them to speak. We've been speaking to community members throughout this whole process to get here. With that being said, I want to invite anyone who would like to come to Sky Meadow Country Club on December 11th at 10 o'clock a.m. for a community meeting. For anyone who wishes to attend, please come. We'll provide you with a complete overview of what's going on, and we'll answer any questions, and we'll take all feedback at that time. So it's a community meeting on December 11th at 10 a.m. at Sky Meadow, and we'll look for that community meeting to happen, and we will present what this is again and listen to what everyone has to say, and with that, then we'll come back with a formal application to you folks. So I've said enough, and thank you very much for listening, but I would love some feedback from you folks as to if I'm headed down the right path or not. I do want people to understand this will be developed in some way, shape, or form. I hope to be the custodian of this property to get it to the finish line. This is the last piece of the flex use overlay district, and it will put to bed the last of the Hall's Corner development, which has been really contentious since the beginning of time. So I'd love to see the last chapter of this end on a good note, and then we can move on instead of continuing to fight. Hannaford's going to do something with this. I'd like it to transition to me and put it in a way that will do it in a fashion that everyone can live with. So please come to the meeting, give me your feedback and your thoughts, and come with an open mind. That's all I ask. Thank you all.
Okay.
Good evening again, everyone. Paul
Yep.
Chisholm, Keach Nordstrom Associates. Our company pulled together the conceptual plan that you're looking at here. As Rob alluded to, it's 44 new units, townhouse style, 11 buildings, 4 units a building. Really, the idea is to kind of take what's there. There's a big area that's about 6 acres, which is the colored area you see on the plan here, not meshed with the photo background. That's really the area we're considering for development. It's about 1,000 feet of new road, which would bring Mangerian Lane into formal existence. I know if you look up at the GIS now, it's there, but it's not really much of anything. In reality, it's more of a gravel path today. So it kind of keeps with what was envisioned there in some sense. And really, like I said, brings this area to life. The units themselves, as Rob mentioned, are being proposed as non-age restricted, really just due to a matter of market conditions and really what the city housing study demonstrated as a need not too long ago. The units themselves, as you mentioned, Dennis Myers is the architect. They're 3 stories, a little bit more condensed of a unit. They'll have garages and a little bit of living space on the first floor. Second floor would be living space, and then third floor would be bedrooms. The units themselves will have all the city utilities, sewer, water, gas, all of that, which really this parcel has been set up for. Linda, thank you for putting those up. Those are the elevations of the townhomes. Obviously, we're still in the preliminary design stage. We're gathering feedback. This is going to be a little bit of a process for this project. It's a little bit in a unique area, being in the flexible use overlay zone. And there's some particularities to that Jerry Prunier will help walk us through when the time is appropriate. Other than that, as Rob also mentioned, there's a couple things that we'll be looking for specifically for feedback, and not just at the public hearing, the community meeting, but also from you folks. I think we're really interested in hearing your thoughts on the proposed use, on the proposed layout that the site plan has there, if you think that's appropriate, and if there's any changes you might want us to consider. We could certainly look at some different things now. It's easier to do it now, earlier on in the process than later. And if there's just anything else that we haven't talked about, that we're not thinking about, that might be on your mind, we'd just kind of love to hear that now, so we can really iron this thing out before it comes back before you sometime early 2022. So that being said, I'll open it up back to you guys. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll make a couple comments, just first off, I think my opinion is there's been some significant accommodation of our earlier comments to the discussion in this. So, I'm thinking back to our earlier discussion that we had as a board, and one of the things we talked about was more buildings at a smaller scale. So it seems like this is going in that direction to us. Then I'll add, having just completed the master plan for the city, the housing shortage thing is real, and I think we're in the neighborhood of like somewhere around 5,000 homes we're missing in the city. So while this is a decent amount of homes, it's just scratching the surface of what we really need. But it's working in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. Then, the layout to me looks reasonable. I like how there's a significant amount of green space. The other thing this brings to mind with me, and this would be something that maybe as the development team you might want to look at, the master plan specifically that's just been approved like about a month ago. This looks very similar to what the master plan, which had 1,000 people from the community input on, was proposing for Daniel Webster College. It's very similar looking, so I think the alignment there is pretty good. with the master plan, and there was a lot of input on that site that wanted to look like this. So I think there's consistency there that could be a positive thing on the master plan. So, so I guess those are my initial comments. I mean, I think architecturally, you know, on the site, there is some walking paths around here. I would think that those are going to be important to maintain and make the connections. The other thing is there's a lot of solar in this part of the city, and there's more and more. So as you start laying out or do final layouts on the buildings and final roof designs, you might want to think about that, you know, the directionality and how much solar could go on the roofs reasonably. So that might be just something to think about. That's also part of the master plan is electric vehicle charging is also a big deal in the master plan. So, you know, this seems like a pretty good site for having some of those capabilities somewhere, you know, maybe in the shared parking or something. So, you know, those are all my comments, which are generally just master plan related to, you know, so. But welcome, Mr. Barley.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, thank you. I would echo some of what you said. I mean, I would say personally, I would not have looked unfavorably at rental units. I didn't see that as a concern. With that said, I mean, obviously, we did talk about, as Scott said, sort of the, you know, spreading out the units rather than one large unit. And I do think that this proposal in particular probably serves a sort of smaller subset of the housing need, which is sort of entry-level housing. And so I think that's really important. Knowing what I know about some of the feedback you received the first time around, I think this will be much better received by the abutters. It's certainly more consistent with, you know, the surrounding residential uses. And so I tend to agree. I also like the layout. I like the fact that you've been very intentional about, in this design, about how the space relates to, you know, the surrounding neighborhood and providing the buffer and providing lots of green space. So I think those are all, you know, very positive aspects of what you proposed here.
Other comments from the board for Ms. Harper?
I pretty much echo most of the things that both of you spoke about. I think the term we used was campus-style housing the last time we saw the renderings for this project. And the only thing I have to say is that I would be very curious to see what kind of landscaping that you're going to be doing on the site. Because, you know, it does have a lot of potential to fit well into the area and, you know, perhaps provide kind of a park feel, I guess. There's a lot of green space there. And that's it.
Mr.
Sorry,
Barley?
I just
Yep.
have one other comment that came to mind. With the original proposal, I recall that there was some contemplation of there being perhaps, you know, some retail or other sort of accessory uses incorporated into the design, you know, because there was going to be some element of a sort of community space that could include other uses. I don't see that explicitly on the plan here, and I don't know what the feedback was from abutters on that previously. I certainly really like that idea, and I don't know if there's, you know, the potential that could be, you know, incorporated into this design. But just a thought, you know, in terms of sort of maybe pulling a piece from that original design, if that's sort of relevant to the plan here.
Mr. Hirsch?
I like the scale of this also. I feel it really fits in very well as opposed to what we looked at before. I don't think it's going to be feasible necessarily to put a retail component into the property. I don't feel that the market's going to be there, from my knowledge of that marketplace. more than a convenient food store. So I think it's a poor idea to push them in that direction. Retail, it doesn't function very well unless it's in the right traffic pattern, traffic location. So I definitely.
Yeah, no, and
encourage that.
I'm not pushing, I didn't mean to suggest that I'm pushing one way or the other. I was just raising it, as I said, I
No, I
recall that there was sort of an element of the original proposal that, again, it sort of had a sort of community element to it. And, whether that was retail or restaurant or what have you. So I was just sort of raising that as an issue, not suggesting that I would, they should be pushed in one way or the other.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Peterson, anything?
Not at this time.
Okay. Just a quick question, just for some of our information. The height waiver, I mean, generally speaking, I assume, digging down here, that this is a ledge issue here. Is that I know when you drive out there, you can see it, but, yeah.
May I speak?
Yeah, go ahead. This is discussion.
Sorry,
so,
yeah. As far as the ledge, so if you go back to the other site plan,
Yeah.
there is ledge, it's rocky, it's bony
Yep.
sites, but the area that's largely green on the family roast beef side, for those of you next to that portion is very ledgy. So that's an area right there that we avoided. The road that's Managerian Lane currently, that's already cut in, although everybody's just using it to dump stuff, basically. But that road is cut in, just the rough of it. And that's why the housing is basically sited around it. We try to avoid as much ledge. I don't know, we haven't done geos yet, but there will be some we're gonna hit ledge.
Right.
But these aren't basement units, so we're not gonna have to really infiltrate too much. But really, what's great about this site is all of we've got detention already in sight. This was planned to be something much greater than what it's going to be. And it was a master plan that was done from the start. So the benefactor of public sewer, public water, detainage, it's already on site. And with this being much less density, it's really not intrusive to the site. We have more than we need, in other words. I mean, this is a developer's dream as far as having, we don't usually have everything stubbed to the site, underground electric, water, sewer, and detention. So that's all in place. With respect to the commercial, we've given thought to the neighbors residentially because they're the most vociferous. The ones that have been quiet are the commercial tenants. And what we view them as, this is a site that's being developed with a tremendous amount of amenities already in place. There's restaurants, there's veterinarian, there's even healthcare, there's a kindergarten to the side. So this is already like a village district minus the housing. So this type of housing is a great buffer, transitional area to go from the traditional single-family housing to the south and the commercial neighborhood to the middle. This gives, almost a Back Bay brownstone type of feel where you can walk out of your home and then go to the existing tenants. The problem for the commercial tenants right now is they're underutilized. There's not enough density here to support. This is not Daniel Webster Highway. These tenants are, not flourishing to the greatest level. The ones that flourish the most are the delivery folks because they can leave this area and then get to a greater market trade area. So we didn't want to compete with them, so to speak, but we think that this works in conjunction and gives credence to the commercial abutters as well as it does the residential abutters. That's where we came from it. So there's really no commercial component to this for that. And we did move it away from the ledge. That's giving a natural buffer. It was thought about as having some park area, like for kids. The school obviously has its own identity, but where that ledge is, if we can work in a playground area for kids, that would be nice, and it would be buffered from having any noise translate to the neighborhood to the rear. But that's it. Thanks again.
Yeah, okay. Any other comments for the board? No? Okay. if you don't have any other questions of us, I think we'll wrap up this discussion item. So, I don't know if staff, was there any comments you wanted to make while we're in discussion, or questions you wanted to ask us on it?
No, not at this time. I would just encourage those folks who are listening to the meeting this evening to attend the December 11th community meeting that was discussed by the potential applicant. That will be at 10 a.m. at Sky Meadow, if I heard that correctly. So I would just encourage anyone who's listening to certainly attend that meeting, and obviously as any more information related to this application is available to the planning department, we will post that online for your consumption. But other than that, no additional comments.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mr. Morelli?
and just, I guess, a quick follow-up on that. Obviously, that meeting on the 11th is not a public hearing. The city has no responsibility for providing notice. I just wonder if there's going to be some effort to sort of broadcast the happening of that meeting so we can ensure sort of maximum attendance. And to the applicant, I guess, I'm just.
That's the purpose of this meeting.
Yeah, I just meant beyond this, to the extent that, that people aren't necessarily in. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, sure. I just think for your own benefit, obviously, the more people you can get there, the better, I think.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that wraps up our discussion items that we had on the agenda. I think, Matt, you had a couple more things you wanted to talk about that.
I had just two very brief items, just more informational than anything. I wanted to quickly mention that at the December 2nd meeting of the board, there will be a referral item for the board's consideration, and both Director Tim Cummings and I and our consultant will present to you the inclusionary zoning ordinance that was provided as part of the supplemental application materials this evening to you. I will send around a brief overview of these changes, which is, we have a current inclusionary zoning ordinance, and we're basically proposing a repeal and replace to that with several substantive amendments. I'll send an overview around to the group via email rather than doing that overview tonight. And I would just offer that for anyone that has questions about the ordinance as you review it, because it is one of the more complex ordinances that we have, I'm happy to sit down with you individually and do a walkthrough or a telephone call or a Zoom or exchange emails about it. There are some intricacies to it. We are learning a bit as we go, but we really feel it's important to put this into place as soon as possible in an effort to address the housing study that was done in 2020 and the feasibility study that was done recently as well. But again, if you do have questions in advance of that meeting on the 2nd, I'm happy to answer them, and I'm sure you can ask me some questions that I haven't yet answered in my own mind too, so I encourage you to do that. The other item I wanted to briefly mention is that, as you can see, on October 8th of 2021, the city was served with BJ's Wholesale Club v. City of Nashua. This is an appeal of the Planning Board's decision related to the Costco project and the True Storage project. Happy to answer questions about this directly to Planning Board members offline. Either myself or Scott McPhee are available as a resource to answer those questions. But until any further litigation proceeds, we would ask that you just be respectful of the record as it stands currently and not make any public comments. And please feel free to ask us questions, though, if you do have questions about what you see in this public document. I just want to make you aware of that. That's all.
And I would just add to that, we really shouldn't have discussion about it in meetings either.
Yeah. This is the extent of the discussion that I was hoping to have with the board.
Yeah, no, that was not.
No,
that's
absolutely true.
Yeah, I just meant to add on to what
Yeah.
you were,
Yep.
what you were suggesting.
Mr. Peterson?
Just to be clear, there's a meeting on December 2nd about inclusionary zoning?
The planning board meeting on December 2nd will include a referral item on inclusionary zoning. So you need only show up to the regular meeting, and we will be there to present on it.
Thank you.
But the draft is here that you passed out.
That's correct. Yeah, we're doing this one a little bit odd in the sense that we wanted to give you the information as far in advance as possible. And so you'll see it on December 2nd again.
Yep, okay. Ms. Harper?
Just a question, Matt. So will you be giving us kind of an overview of where we are at currently and then kind of going? Okay.
Yeah, I was planning to do that tonight, but I know that the Patriots play at 8:20, and we've had a pretty short meeting. And so, frankly, we're going to do a comprehensive presentation that night, and I think it's better to provide it in that one unified format rather than giving you some information piecemeal. And so that really is the better way to approach it. So great. We'll be there to do a full overview, take questions, and obviously we do hope we get board support that evening, but we want to be prepared as possible.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion items? Okay. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Anybody?
Motion to adjourn?
So we have a motion to adjourn by Mr. Hirsch. Don't need a second on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. We are adjourned 8:15.